Hello and welcome. In this video I will talk about a project I made for the course TDDD27 at Linköping University. I have created a podcast player and browser called Kast, and in this video I will start off by showing you how the web application works and some of its features, and then I will move on and talk about the structure of the application and perhaps show you some code and talk a bit about what frameworks I used, and then I will talk a bit about how I deploy the application and how I monitor its performance and so on. But let's start off. This is Kast and the application I have created. Up here you have a search box which allows you to search for your favorite podcasts or whichever podcast. So let's search for Serial. Here you see the top results from the iTunes podcast library, which I use to actually find podcasts. So it is a vast amount of podcasts that I can find through that service. And if I go into a specific podcast, for example, Serial, the one I was looking for, I can see all its recent episodes and some information about it, and I can refresh in order to make sure that I have all the latest episodes loaded. I can see some more information about each episode when it was published, and I get the download link and so on. And I can of course load every episode that has ever been published for this podcast. However, Kast is a bit better if you sign in, so I'm gonna show you how that looks. And I'm gonna sign in with Google and approve everything. And what's different now is that, as you can see up here in the menu, I have access to my library and some other things up here. But in my library I can see all the recent episodes for the podcasts that I'm subscribed to, and of course the podcast that I am subscribed to. And here I can remove subscriptions from different podcasts. So and if I do that, the latest episode list here is automatically refreshed reactively, which makes it really simple and fast and easy to work with, because everything you do is instantly updates the interface instantly. And I can mark an episode as played and mark it as unplayed again, and again get more information and read the description about it and so on. And of course I can start playing an episode, which then loads the episode, and I can seek backwards and forwards in the podcast. And the progress of each episode that I'm listening to is automatically saved, so that I can listen to a podcast and switch to another computer and log into my account there, and it will start off, next time I listen to this episode, it will start off at the same point, so I won't have to seek in the episode to find the correct spot. Yeah, and that is basically it. I can show you how it works when I subscribe to an episode too. So say for instance I want to search something from P3, which is a radio station in Sweden. I want to listen to some documentaries, and I subscribe to that podcast. And if I then go to my library, I see the latest episodes from that podcast too in my list here. And I can, of course, mark some episodes as played if I've heard them previously. To create Kast, I have used Meteor together with React. Meteor is a full stack application framework in JavaScript that works on both the server and the client. And React is a client-side Vue library, basically, created by Facebook, that allows you to write to create your view with separate components for everything and so on, which allows you to really work in a fast and efficient way with a good structure. Meteor is a framework that is largely focused on data, and it has some really efficient methods for copying data from the server to the client to reduce load times and share data across multiple devices. And it allows you to create a powerful application without the hassle of actually creating an entire REST API, for instance. React, on the other hand, doesn't care at all about how your data is transported and stored and so on. It only cares about the view, which makes these two work very well together. Along with these two libraries, I am using modular CSS, which allows you to write CSS without having to care about the fact that CSS is global. So, for instance, you won't have to have unique CSS classes for everything. You can simply write your CSS for each separate module. So, for instance, or a separate component. So, for instance, this episode box here, it's a React component that has its own classes. I think this play button has the class play button, and so does this one, but they are entirely different, works in entirely different ways. And this modular CSS structure allows you to not care about that, and it's very powerful to actually write CSS in a hassle-free way. And I'm using Sus along with this modular CSS structure to actually allow me to write really powerful CSS in a simple and efficient way. I am also using ECMAScript 2015, which is the next iteration of JavaScript, basically. It has some really powerful features such as classes and modules and constants and some arrow functions, which allows you to write CSS in a more logical way without having to care about complicated inheritance and what scope you are in and so on. It allows you to write JavaScript as you expect it to work. And I'm also using ESLint to help me follow a good structure in my application or in the code, and to actually make sure that I'm not making any stupid mistakes and so on. It helps you to follow good practices and so on. The structure of the application follows what the Meteor development group recommends. I have a separate folder for my different API methods. I have some helpers. I have code that runs only during startup, and I have my UI components and pages and so on. So if you take a look here, I have my main layout for the application. I have the components that I use, and I have some pages. For instance, I have a library page which basically is the page you see when you are in your library, which then uses, for instance, my episode component and so on. And this allows you to reuse your components in a really efficient and hassle-free way, which is nice. Here I have my API with all where I declare my Mongo collections, since Meteor uses MongoDB, and some tests, of course, for my different methods and so on. In order to deploy my application online, I'm using Heroku. This is a platform as a service company that allows you to simply deploy a web app with, it can be basically any language at all, and then add some add-ons, for instance, for databases or log management and so on. And together with that, I use Kadira, which is a Meteor-specific application performance monitoring tool, which looks like this. And here I can see how my application is performing, if I have any potential issues, and how much memory it is consuming and CPU and so on. I can also see some more Meteor-specific numbers, such as what publications, that is, what data the server is sending to the client, and maybe here I can see if I need to make a publication more efficient, if it's very expensive, for instance, because then I want to reduce that. I want to put as little load on my server as it is possible, and this allows me to really understand how my application is performing, which is really good. And this is basically what I had planned to show you. I hope you enjoyed this video and thought it was interesting. I will put a link to the application in the description of this video if you want to try it out for yourself. Thank you for watching. Take care.